We're taking stock with Adrian Gore, Chief Executive of Discovery. Discovery's been in a joint venture with the First Rand Group, which its F&B business had a joint venture with Discovery on Discovery Card. Now that seems to have caused some delays in the launch of Discovery Bank because, of course, First Rand and Discovery are going to become rivals, even though Discovery emerged from the First Rand Group. It was incubated there 25 years ago. It's amazing, isn't it, how in a quarter of a century the pupil has turned into the rival, Adrian Gore.
Well, it's interesting, when Discovery started, First Rand wasn't around. So
you started in the auspices of R&B and
R&B
gave you a desk in a corner.
And they kind of formed this massively successful, it's an unbelievable story, First Rand in and of itself, but you're 100% right. There's always been competitive issues, and there's always been a laissez-faire view of all parties that's good for society and it should continue. The bank is nothing special. I think the JV out of the card, Discovery Card, was, initially it wasn't easy. It took us a while collectively to get it to work. When it worked really well. So the idea of building a bank out of it was, I think, very, very compelling. But then actually extricating how we would do that would be a JV with FNB or First Rand. Went to a phase of where we thought the bank would land, there'd be a shareholder in it. But from a regulatory standpoint, that wasn't doable. Competition issues. So what delayed this thing as well was the requirement that they sell out completely. So it has created some delay. I think we're on track now. We said by the end of the year to launch the bank, and I think we'll do it. So we if I have bags under my eyes, that's why we're pushing collectively hard.
What's it going to look like? I mean, we are familiar with the bricks and mortar bank. And then over the last 20 years or so, internet banking has then transformed into app-based banking, mobile banking. You don't need the branch anymore. Investec has shown that through its model and the call center supported model. What does the Discovery Bank model look like?
I need to invite you to the launch. So I can't tell you much, but
I'm going to be busy that day, so you can tell me now.
I will tell you that the three trends in our model: technology, behavioural understanding of people's choices and how they make choices, and social purpose. The fusion of those three things is what the bank is absolutely addressing. So we built a very powerful shared value model. It works on virtually every industry, and we see it in the same way in the bank. So I can't tell you more, but philosophically our conviction comes out of the idea that the Discovery model works. We know it works, and we think very strongly it will apply to banking.
Who do you see as your biggest rivals?
I think our natural client base is our Discovery clients, obviously.
And how many million of those? I mean, this is your core Discovery Health members.
There are nearly 2 million Vitality members, for example. There are 3.5 million. We've got a really different segments, but and
those people will be banked.
They'll be natural.
Elsewhere.
They'll be banked elsewhere. We have 300,000 accounts on the Discovery Card, so that's also obviously we're going to migrate that across. So that is an obvious potential client base. These people are banked elsewhere, and they're banking, my sense is, with the Big Four and Investec. So they are our natural competitors. There is no hubris. The banks in the space are strong. They're excellent. Their technology is good. And in fact, if you look at our history, we're disruptors. We typically go into markets where there are strong competitors. So we're not a land grab company going to space that isn't contested. So we're going to a highly, highly contested space. We've got the old-fashioned view. If the value proposition is really good, people will come and buy the product. I mean, that's at the core of our belief. But I think we've got a strong view of how this thing can work and why it should work.
Discovery started out in the longest period of continuous recession in the last 45 years of South African history. The period from 1990 all the way to after the 1994 elections is almost a period of red, negative and contraction in the South African economy. You grew up in that environment. The genesis of Discovery Bank is in one of the most hostile in terms of attitude towards banking in South Africa. The calls for the nationalisation of the Reserve Bank, calls for the nationalisation of commercial banks, restitution without compensation on land, threatening the entire financial sector. Yet in that environment, somehow you see through the clutter and the noise to say, you know what we should do? We should launch another bank. It's not normal, isn't it?
Well, you put the issues so articulately, it worries me. But in truth, I think firstly, ignoring the banking, I strongly believe the best time to build a business is in difficult times. It's a a cognitive error that you should do this stuff in good times. I mean, I know emotionally when things are good, you think, wow, things are really good, there's a future. But the best times are in difficult times. People are distracted, opportunities are underpriced. Discovery started not just in difficult times, in the very fall of apartheid, where it wasn't sure the country survived this almost revolutionary time.
Chris Hani gets assassinated
Absolutely.
while you were sitting, with
building.
your clipboard planning this thing.
I remember the Bishu uprising was in that time. South Africans didn't know where it would end, but others were distracted, and that gave us a space to get going. So I strongly believe building is done best in times that are depressed and difficult. So that's the first point. The second point, you can look at it, the banks are complex, but they matter. The summary of all the stuff you're saying is banks are important. People feel strongly about them. They're a rallying cry. They're an important institutional piece.
If banks fail, countries fail.
Absolutely. So they have an importance that, our belief is that if you can build one that's of quality, it will add to the social environment and it will be important and valuable. I also think that our approach hopefully will be in a way that people find appealing. If you look at the entire Discovery model, it's about taking financial services and turning into something that shares value. If we can do that to banking, we think that that's a positive issue. So I think every criticism you rightly make, the flip side is it matters, and it's important. And if it's done well, I think you create something quite special.
2008 financial crisis led to much tighter regulation of banks worldwide. The Basel requirements, the world's most boring documents, but they form the backbone of the way in which banks are regulated nowadays. They determine how much capital banks are required to keep on their balance sheets in order to be allowed to lend out to borrowers and to do that sort of stuff. Yeah. Those capital requirements, could they be a hindrance on the future expansion of Discovery elsewhere?
I don't think so. Again, if you do it well, capital is not capital is available, we've never, regulation is a hugely complicated thing. This whole process has taken time. It's extremely onerous, and rightly so, about banking. It's a very complex institution. But Discovery, I think, has always embraced complexity. We work in the UK under the Bank of England. It's also very similar to here. These are complicated, regulated markets, but I don't think that it turns on that. It turns on, at the end of the day, do you meet the needs of the customer? The other stuff is complex, but it's a commodity. You've got to manage it. Raise the capital, capitalize it properly. We're not building a bank on a shoestring. This is a capital-heavy approach. We're not taking shortcuts. This is not an arbitrage on capital, fintech. This is a proper, substantial bank. So that stuff has got to be done well. But the issue for us is the value proposition going to work? Is the technology going to deliver as we think it will? Extremely exciting.
Now, Discovery Bank is currently headed up by Barry Hall. Now, you've sacrificed Tito Mboweni and sent him off to National Treasury. If SARS came to you and said, Adrian, we need Barry Hall back, our technology is failing, you would have seen the newspaper headlines this week that the e-filing system is under threat. Tom Moyane's stopping of the modernization process of SARS has set SARS back. And Barry Hall, of course, up until his resignation, was in charge of that modernization process, and he's been in charge of the tech side of your bank. Would you sacrifice Barry Hall to the national duty in the same way as you've done with Tito Mboweni, if asked?
If asked, we do what's best for the country, obviously. But on the other hand, you're comparing a non-exec to an exec. They're two very different. You're comparing an exec on the runway to the launch of a bank. So I don't know what that means. But listen, Barry is a remarkably skilled builder of complex technology. He did that at SARS, he did it at Home Affairs. Hopefully he's doing it here. And I asked him the other day, honestly, Barry, are we building the best technology? He looked at me with us twinkling. I said, this is world class, you will see. You know what I mean? So I'm feeling good about what Barry's done. But he did a great job at SARS. He really did. It's complex stuff.
They might need it back.
It's worrying what's going on there.
Adrian Gore, Chief Executive of Discovery. In a moment, we want to talk about the expansion of Discovery globally. Now, about 10 years ago, they had big ambitions in the United States. They created a business called Destiny Health that used the principles of Vitality, built and created in South Africa, to add value to that particular business. But they grew, and their competitors saw them coming and essentially shut the doors on this Destiny in the United States. And Discovery, after racking up R1 billion in losses, drew a line under that, but left Vitality behind. And Vitality now is in multiple countries around the world. Discovery also has a business in the United Kingdom. And critically, and one has to ask Adrian Gore, and I will in a moment, whether a 25% stake in China's Ping An Health, the health subsidiary of China's biggest insurance company, could be Discovery's 10 cents. More on that in a moment.